Here we go. So we are right at the very end of 5b3, and then we're going to go straight into Daf Vav, page 6. And what we're going to go through here is a kind of a pretty, I wouldn't say it's the most complex kind of stuff. It's literally Jewish geography. It's literally talking about places and their names and what place is this, and biblically what place was it, and then rabbinically what place is it. So we're gonna read a bunch of that kind of stuff, and we'll see what we can make out of it. The context of this is the questions that some of the sages had about different places for reading Megillah, right? We have basically two or three kinds of places that read the Megillah, big towns and villages and so on. As long as they're not, I gotta do this. As long as they're not surrounded by a wall from the time of Joshua, they read Megillah on the 14th of Adar. And any city or town that had a wall from the time of Joshua reads Megillah on the 15th. So that brings us into this need to constantly figure out the history of the different places in the land of Israel mostly, but also possibly in Babylonia. Is this town identifiable with any ancient town that we have mentioned, for instance, from the time of Joshua, where we might think that this is a town that should be reading on the 15th? I should just say that these kinds of questions, which have this ritual, consequence to them, that's one kind of motivation to know about history. But for instance, with the return of Jews to the land of Israel over the last 140 years or so, Jewish geography, literally Jewish geography, is a huge passion in Israel just for nationalistic, secular reasons, not because of religious reasons, but simply to try to reconnect with the land of our ancestors, and places that are mentioned in the Bible, finding where they are, re-identifying things. This is a huge activity in Israel among archaeologists, among geographers, among amateurs. This is something that happens all the time in Israel. There's a tremendous investment of energy and passion because it has this political, nationalistic, cultural significance to reconnect to roots, right? To our roots in the land. So there's that kind of aspect to this as well. And scholars that are or people that are really spending a lot of time in this, these kinds of texts actually become interesting to them on that level as well. So we're going to start from the last paragraph on 5b3, where it says, having cited the verse from Joshua. Okay, I hope people can see that. And can somebody start us off, please? We're going to go from there into the next page. Errol, thank you.
Having cited the verse from Joshua that mentioned the cities of Hamas, Rakas, Kinneras, the Gemara now gives the etymology of these names. When I was a young boy,
Rabbi Yochanan said.
Oh, sorry. Rabbi Yochanan said, when I was a young boy, concerning which I
said something.
The elders.
Okay, that's right. When I was a young boy, I said something concerning which I consulted the elders. Okay, so he's reminiscing about what a smart young kid he was.
And it was found, as I said.
And I was right. Look at that. I was right. It was amazing. What did he say?
The Gemara now cites Rabbi Yochanan's statement, the city identified in Scripture as
All right, somebody, David, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Okay.
Where am I? The city identified in Scripture as Hamas is Tiberias. And why was it called Hamas? Because of the hot springs of Tiberias.
Okay. So there's the Hamas or Hamat. It's Hamat in Israeli
Sorry.
Hebrew today. That's okay. That's, you got the S here from the Art Scroll guys. Keep it the old way. But I don't want it to be confused with Hamas, the the organization that's out there. This is Hamat, which means the heatedness of something. So he's, what?
That's Rakat then as well.
Also, right.
Okay, thank you.
So Rabbi Yochanan said, when I was a kid, I made the connection that the word Hamat has to do with hot stuff, and Tiberias has hot springs. So I said, hey, it seems to me that when it says in the Torah, not the Torah, Tanakh, and in the book of Joshua, Hamat, they're really talking about the city of Tiberia. They're really talking about the city of Tiberias. And guess what? I was right. Okay. So let me just point out, for instance, now that part of what's going on here is that over time, cities are established, they disappear, they are reestablished, or that spot that was once upon a time a city is, spots that are chosen as cities usually have some kind of, advantage to being chosen. They're at the crossroads of a river or a trade route or something. And as long as that factor still exists, it'll be established as a city again and again and again. So once upon a time, the city of New York was called New Amsterdam. Right? So somebody now, who, if we lost a lot of the records, would somehow find some mention of New Amsterdam and then read something about what it says and go, oh, you know what? I think New Amsterdam is really New York. And yeah, you're right. Okay, so that's what's happening here. What's happening here is that the city of Tiberias was established much, much, much later. It was established in Roman times, and we're going to get into etymologies of the name Tiberias that are going to be fanciful. But the name Tiberias was some Roman general, and the city was named after that guy. So that's really what gives the name Tiberias. Like Caesarea is named after Caesar. So, but what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is, but there was a previous city at that same spot, or once upon a time that same city was called something else. So he's identifying the contemporary city of Tiberias with a city from 1,000 years before, right? With the city of Hamat. Okay, and he says that the reason that it was called that was because of the hot springs, which are there to this very day. Next paragraph.
The city identified in Scripture as Rakat is Sipori,
also known as Separus.
And why was it called Rakat? Because it is elevated in relation to its surroundings, like the bank of a river is elevated in relation to the river.
Okay.
The city.
Again, Separus is the name of the city, the town, as established by the Romans, and he's saying no, but there's a biblical antecedent in that very spot because it was up on the top of a hill. So that's like a promontory. So that's what the original name was, and now it's called Sipori.
The city identified in Scripture as Kinneret is Ginosar. And why was it called Kinneret? Because its fruits are as sweet as the sound of a harp.
Okay, so that Kinneret is the Sea of Galilee, and some people think that it's called a Kinneret because the shape is a little bit like the shape of a harp. And here we have the Talmud saying, and this is Rabbi Yochanan saying, that it's really because of the sweet sound of the harp and the fruits that grow around the banks of the Kinneret. The Kinneret, of course, is where Tiberias is on the banks of the Kinneret. So that's Ginosar. There is a kibbutz that exists today that is Kibbutz Ginosar. If I'm not mistaken, Ginosar is on the other side of the Kinneret. It's on the southeast, I think, of the Kinneret, and Tiberias is in the south middle west bank of the Kinneret. Right? But anyway, these are different areas, all around the same area. Different cities or different settlements all around the same area around the Sea of Galilee. Okay.
The Gemara questions Rabbi Yochanan's statement. Rava said, "Is there anyone who says that Rakat is not Tiberias?"
Rabbi Yochanan said Rakat is Tzipori, is Cyprus. But now Rava says, are you kidding? Everybody knows that Rakat is Tiberias.
But when a great man dies here in Babylonia, there in Tiberias they eulogize him as follows. Great is he in Shleshach, Sheshach, Babylonia, and he has a name in Rakat, Tiberias. And when the coffin of one who died in Babylonia is brought here to bury him in Tiberias, they eulogize him as follows. Lovers of Israel, residents of Rakat, go forth and receive the slain of the deep Babylonia.
Okay.
This proves...
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, wait, where did I go? This proves that Rakat is Tiberias and not Tzipori, as Rav Yochanan had said.
Okay, so Rava, he lives in Babylonia. Rava is the great sage living in Babylonia, and in the middle of the 3rd century CE. And he says, no, but we know for sure Rabbi Yochanan is in the land of Israel. So he's a little bit taking issue with somebody in the land of Israel who's telling us what the place names are in Israel. He says, don't tell me that. We have, we know, by universal practice that the identification of Rakat is with Tiberias, because we know exactly what happens in our community on an ongoing basis. There's a connection between the two communities, right? There's communication back and forth between Babylonia and the Jewish communities in the land of Israel. And when somebody in Babylonia is who's a sage, we're not talking a great man, right? We're talking about we're not talking about just anybody. The news travels all the way to the land of Israel, and in the Jewish community in Tiberias, they also publish eulogies or an obituary notice, and they make a reference to this to the loss, and what they say is, great is he in Sheshach, which is from the book of Daniel. So this is an allusion to Babylonia, and he has a reputation that extends all the way to Tiberias, right? And they use the word Rakat. They're in Tiberias, and they're using the word Rakat to signify their place. And they're going, look at this, what a loss! Here was a Babylonian sage, and we knew about him all the way over here. So that's one example that he gives. And then the next example that he gives is that sometimes people were brought. They weren't buried. They died in Babylonia. They weren't buried in Babylonia, but they were brought to the land of Israel to be buried. Right? El Al, used to do this all the time. So, by the way, there's a famous joke, right, that everybody knows, right? This is number 48. You know it, right? The steward is already nodding. He knows it. So a woman is taking El Al back in the good old days, and she has her little pet carrier um, uh, with her, and she checks the pet carrier, and she goes, "Look, I want you to take very good care. You know, this is my beloved little toy poodle, and it's very important that everything be okay. And I need to get him right away. As soon as we land, in Ben Gurion Airport." So they go, "Sure, of course, madam, of course, we'll take good care." They take the carrying case, they throw it into the luggage. Um, they come to Ben Gurion, they land, and the baggage guy opens up the baggage hold and takes out the pet carrier and looks inside, and lo and behold, the dog is dead. And he goes, "Oh no, the woman is going to have a heart attack. She's going to be so upset." And he runs around the whole airport, and he actually finds another toy poodle running around that looks just like the toy poodle that was her dog. So he does a little switcheroo, and he puts the new toy poodle into the into the carrier, and proudly walks out, to the woman who's been waiting and anxiously and so on. And he goes, "Madam, I told you we would take good care of your dog. Here is the carrier. Everything is just perfect." And she takes the carrier and she looks inside, and there's the dog, and she faints. And they have to revive her, and they go, "What's the matter? What's the matter? What's the matter?" She goes, "The dog is alive. I brought my dog. My dog was dead. I brought my dog so I could bury my dog in Israel. And look at that, my dog came back to life." So that's the story. So back to here. So the custom of burying somebody who dies outside the land of Israel in the land of Israel is an ancient custom. We talked about it actually in the other tractate that we learned. And here also, a Babylonian sage who was brought to the land of Israel, they would also make a big announcement: "Come out and greet this person," right? "Lovers of Israel, residents of Rakat," and that's in Tiberias, they're saying this. "Go forth and receive, go to greet the slain of the deep," right? The deep is an allusion to Babylonia. Land of Israel is considered, we make aliyah, we go up to the land of Israel, you go down to Babylonia. So these are clear examples of a practice that's alive and well in the Jewish community, which show that the word Rakat is used to stand for Tiberias. Rabbi Yochanan must be wrong. And now the Gemara.
The Gemara presents another proof that Rakat is Tiberias. When Rav Zierah died, a certain eulogizer began his eulogy on him with the following remarks: "The land of Shinar, Babylonia, conceived and bore Rav Zierah, but the land of beauty, the land of Israel, has raised her delights. Woe to her," says Rakat, "for her precious instrument is lost."
Okay, so this was the bemoaning eulogy that this person gave for this sage. This is an example where the sage didn't come to the land of Israel to be buried. He came to the land of Israel from Babylonia, and then he had a thriving career in the land of Israel. Many Babylonian sages came to the land of Israel to learn the Torah of the land of Israel. So here was Rab Zera, and he was eulogized as, maybe you were born in Babylonia, but you were raised and you were brought up and became such a wonderful sage, a wonderful teacher, of Torah. Delights here refers to the Torah. Here in the land of Israel itself, and what a sadness now it is for our community of Rakat, and he's in Tiberias. What a sadness it is that we have lost this precious instrument, or this precious garment of Torah. So clearly we now have three examples. We have examples of people who die in Babylonia and who are buried in the land of in Babylonia. Look at footnote 11.
The Gemara has cited three different eulogies corresponding to three situations. One, for one who died and was buried in Babylonia, great is he in Shesha, and he has a name in Rakat. He is not physically in Eretz Yisrael, but his name has reached there.
His reputation.
For one who died in Babylonia, but was buried in Eretz Yisrael, lovers of Israel, residents of Rakat, go forth and receive the slain of the deep. The departed is described as slain because it is as if he died before his time for the sin of living outside Eretz Yisrael. For one who entered Eretz Yisrael in his lifetime, Rav Zera emigrated from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Shinar. Woe to her, for her precious instrument is lost. When a righteous person dies, his soul lives on in the next world. His loss is suffered only by those who remain.
Okay, so this is just a little gentle kind of statement about the fact that on the one hand, we try to say, no, this great sage, of course, has gone on to their eternal reward. On the other hand, so why are we so sad? Because it's a loss for us. Okay. So now we continue. So these are three good examples from contemporary practice that shows that Rakat is the word that we use for Tiberius, and it's not for Tzipori. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan's statement, as we say now, needs to be fixed up here. Go ahead.
Having shown that Rabbi Yochanan's statement is flawed, the Gemara presents different identifications of the city of Hamat, Rakat, and Kinneret,
like the challah.
Kinneret. Rather, Rava said, Hamat is Hamai Gerar, Rakat is Tiberius, Kinneret is Ginosar. And why was it Tiberius called Rakat? Because even the empty ones, the sinners who live there, are as full of mitzvot as the pomegranate is full of seeds.
Okay, so if you see that the last one, right? Kinneret is Ginosar. That's the same thing that Rabbi Yochanan said. But Rakat becomes Tiberia instead of Rakat being Tzipori, and Hamat, which was according to Rabbi Yochanan Tiberia, is instead Chamei Gerar. Right? Chamei Gerar, or there's another reading, Chamei Gader, and which means another place where there were hot springs. So the agreement, Rabbi Yochanan was right that the word Hamat has to do with a place with hot springs, but it's not the hot springs of Tiberias, it's the hot springs of someplace else. And Rakat is Tiberias. Okay, so now we have to understand why is Rakat called, why is Tiberias called Rakat? So it's not on a big promontory, it's at the coast. It's built on the slope of the Galilee, but it's right by the coast of the lake, the shore of the lake. So the answer is Rakat means something else, right? So, and this of course is a midrashic play on the language. It's not really reflective of the, because it's not about a geography feature which could have existed in the time of the Bible. It's a name here now that refers to a place much later. He's celebrating the Jewish community of Rakat, but Rakat, when it's mentioned in the book of Joshua, is not a Jewish community. So it's a playful etymology. What's his etymology? The word rakat refers to the word rake. Rake means empty. So even the rekanim sheba, even the empty ones, the people who are empty of Torah, empty of any redeeming qualities, they're not empty at all. They're actually full of mitzvot, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. And this, of course, we know pomegranate legendarily has 613 seeds, just like the 613 commandments of the Torah. So this is a phrase that is used sometimes to sort of praise all of the people of Israel. You don't have to be a great rabbi to be praiseworthy. Guess what? Even the simplest people, the criminals in of the Jewish people, are full of mitzvot like a pomegranate. Maybe they don't do the mitzvah of learning Torah, but they do the mitzvah of helping helping a poor person. They do other mitzvot. Each and every one of us can accomplish so much. If we try to just be a decent human being, all of those mitzvot count. But look at footnote 13, please.
The basis for the name rakat is apparently its similarity to empty.
Right.
However, if that were the case, the name would contain no allusion to the fact that the city's inhabitants are full of mitzvot. Rather, we must explain that rakat is from your temple.
Rakatech. Temple here doesn't mean a building; it means the side of your head, by your eyes. Right, the temples on the side of your skull.
Of the verse Song of Songs, like a piece of pomegranate is your temple. It is from this verse that the Gemara derives that even the sinners of Israel are full of mitzvot, as a pomegranate is full of seeds.
Okay, so here we have a very nice little creative extra step of interpretation. By reading what the Talmud says, if rakat is because of these empty ones, then it sounds like the emphasis is on the negative, right? They're accentuating the negative, emptiness. So why would that be? If we're trying to praise every single person, the hoi polloi, and saying, even the most regular person in Israel is full of mitzvot, so calling everybody empty would be a little bit of an opposite kind of choice. Sounds more like a put down. So according to this interpretation, no, it sounds like that's what it is, but it's not. We're on 6A1, the right-hand side of the page. So then we say, wait a second, but if you look at the verse in the Torah in the Song of Songs, the lover says to their beloved that your face is so beautiful and every single part of your face is so gorgeous and so appealing. The temples, the side of your face is like a beautiful red pomegranate. So there are all kinds of nature allusions in the Song of Songs, where each beloved says to the other one that you're like this piece of nature, you're like an animal, you're like a fruit, you're like a tree, you're like a this and that and the other thing, everything. So the word for the temples at the side of a person's head are rakah, and rakatech means your rakah. So therefore rakat now is not emptiness at all, but it means the temple on the side of the face, and therefore everybody makes the connection to how beautiful the side of the face is of the beloved, and it's full, and it's like a pomegranate. And of course, once we make that association, we go to the pomegranate. The pomegranate has 613 seeds, therefore that's the mitzvot. So we have this whole chain of associations that becomes very positive rather than negative. Okay, good.
Two dissenting views, Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Rakat is its real name and Tiberias is merely a descriptive name. And why was Rakat called Tiberias? Because it is situated in the center of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi said, Rakat is its real name, and Tiberius is merely a descriptive name? And why was Rakat called Tiberius? Because of its fine appearance.
Okay. So we looked at the word rakat and what it might mean. And now they're saying, no, don't focus on rakat. Rakat doesn't have to have an explanation. What has to have an explanation is the word Tiberius. Now remember, I just said before, the word rakat is the ancient name. It's the name that's mentioned in the book of Joshua. So it's a name it's a name for a place that existed before the Israelites come into the land. So making it into a name that stands for, oh, look at how full of mitzvot all of the people are that live in this city. That's an anachronism, because that doesn't exist until the reality that the Talmud is talking about. So that happened hundreds and hundreds of years later. So it's a play. It's a playful using of the name from the Bible to stand for something that's real now. That's the way the rabbis were doing it. So now these other rabbis, these dissenting views, say, forget about that. Rakat is the original name and has nothing to do with the community of today. And Tiberius is the name that we have to understand. Why do we call it Tiberius? Rakat is the real name. So we have two examples, two suggestions of why the name Rakat was shifted to become Tiberius. So one is that it comes from the word tabor. Tabor means belly button, the navel. And therefore, the idea of Tiberius is that it's in the center of the land of Israel. Of course, it's not really in the center of the land of Israel, but it is a kind of, on the east coast of the north of Israel, it's the center. Right, the Galilee goes up and down from Tiberias on the east coast where the Jordan is. So it's sort of the center, but it's not really the center. You could call it a center in terms of it being an important hub for life, for social life. So, but the idea is to take the word Tiberius and make some sense out of it. The other example is to say, no, the word Tiberius is actually a play on two words. Tov Ri, Tiberius, so it's Tivria, and that means it's a good looking place. It's a place that's a fine resort town. It's by the banks of the lake. It's a very, very appealing place. So those are the two names. Again, why the effort to transpose from explaining Rakat to explaining Tiberius? Why the effort to shift over and say, no, it's Tiberius that needs to be explained? Anybody have a suggestion? So it goes back to what I said in my introductory remarks. Some things never change. What we have here is the struggle of the Jewish community in the land of Israel to keep on declaring and establishing its connection with the land. Tiberius, as I said, is a Roman name. It's a name given to a town established by the Romans. So as long as Tiberius is understood as a Roman name, it's going to stick in the craw of the Jewish community, which is trying to keep its foothold in the land and trying to say, this is not, the Romans may have power over us right now, but they don't own this land. We do. And therefore, what there is here is an effort to Judaize the name Tiberius, to turn Tiberius from a Latin word, into an Aramaic word or a Hebrew word, and say that's what it really means, and forget about the general, the Emperor Tiberius. This is, our language, and this is the meaning that we give it. So this is like just subtle ways of reestablishing a kind of a cultural comfort zone for the Jewish community under siege. By the way, that just brings us back earlier. Where is that? If you look at the eulogy on the left-hand side, where it says, and when the coffin of one who died in Babylonia is brought there to bury him in Tiberias, they eulogize him as follows. You see that? It's in the middle, the bottom middle of the left-hand column.
You want me to read that?
So I just want to read the next phrase, lovers of Israel, right? So if you look, lovers of Israel, look now at footnote 7. Beryl, you got footnote 7?
Literally, lovers of the remnants. Rashi writes that this means lovers of Israel.
See Jeremiah.
See Jeremiah, where Israel is referred to as remnants.
Right, and then the Aruch, another authority, says that it's Torah scholars. It's not Sridim, but Shririm. He vocalizes it differently.
What's Aruch?
What?
Aruch.
Aruch is an ancient dictionary of Aramaic.
Oh.
So so what Rashi is saying is that if we have the reading as we have it here, the remnants, the leftovers. So this, when we're talking about Israel, we talk about them as the leftovers. We have, a community that has somehow been able to survive the destruction and the persecutions and so on and so forth. So this becomes an identifying term for the Jewish people. What we have here as a result of seeing, one second, Josie. What we have here as a result of that feeling is the resistance takes on many ways, right? We had a resistance of fighting the Romans. We didn't do very well. There was a terrible, loss and bloodshed. The Bar Kokhba rebellion was another physical military resistance. Rabbinic Judaism is in and of itself resistance to the Romans. The Rabbinic Judaism that we have inherited is a resistance to disappearing, giving into the world, giving into the majority culture. And that resistance takes so many different kinds of fascinating aspects. And here we have a tiny little, in many ways, kind of inconsequential, but there's no such thing. When you have to resist, every tiny little thing that you do can make a difference. So the idea of taking the words, that rakat is in the Torah. We don't need to worry about the meaning of the word rakat. But Tiberius, we better turn that word from a Latin word into a Hebrew word. And that happens to this very day. Yeah, Josie.
I was going to say, I don't know the details, but I know in Israel there's all kinds of arguments about what was this place called, and the Arabs call it this, but it really was that. So it's a contemporary cultural phenomenon that we're still trying to get the names of these towns back to a Jewish connection.
Right, and there's a history to the dynamic of the relationship between the Arab names of places and the Jewish names of places. So I'm not a big expert on this, but a little bit. I know that when there was this first push that I was talking about earlier in the session, when there was this first push to try to rediscover the Jewish settlement places, the Arab names were a tool that was used by the archaeologists and the historians. Oh, where is such a place in the Bible? Well, oh, look, here's a similar name from that the Arabs use for this place. So maybe this is actually the same place. And then you would go and you start doing some digging and whatever it is. Mount Sinai, outside of the land of Israel. We don't know where Mount Sinai is. We have no idea where Mount Sinai is. But we have a particular mountain that has now, a church monastery on it that was identified as Mount Sinai because in Arabic it was called Jebel Musa, that it was called the Mountain of Moses. So okay, if the Arabs are calling it that, they probably have preserved an ancient tradition that this is Moses' mountain, so therefore maybe it's Mount Sinai. So that's the way you would use like Arabic names to rediscover these places. And you've got similarities. Arabic is a very similar. It's a cousin to Hebrew. So, for instance, Nazareth. We want to know where Nazareth is, right? Nazareth for Christians. This is a major place. So you've got the Arabs calling a certain place Nazrat. So Nazrat, oh, that's Nazareth, and so on and so forth. So so this is the way the words were availed of, so that we could find these places. What's happening more today, it shouldn't be shocking to anybody that's reading anything about what's going on in Israel today, is as the right wing voices in Israel are becoming more powerful and louder, then the policy is now to erase Arabic names of places, to take away the name of a place that has an Arabic name and give it a Jewish name, and not that they're simultaneous, not that they're both, but to actually supplant the Arab names with Hebrew names, because this is about, again, establishing ownership, establishing connection. So in the time of the Talmud, the Jewish people didn't have that power. They didn't have sovereignty. The Romans had sovereignty. So it was a resistance movement. Now, with the Jewish state having sovereignty, it's a means of wiping out resistance and minority traditions. Unfortunately. Okay, here we go. Now we're on.
Rav Yochanan stated,
Yes, good.
above the Rakat is the city of Sippori. The Gemara presents a dissenting view. Zera said, Kitron is Sippori. And why was it called Sippori? Because it is perched on top of a mountain like a bird.
Okay, the word tzipor is a bird. Often it's used for a swallow. And I think the problem is I don't know birds from one bird from another. So, but I think it's either it's either a swallow or a sparrow. So I'm not quite sure which one it is. And I wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you put them next to each other for me.
Oh, Rabbi.
But what can I do? I don't know these things. So this week I found a baby duck. I found a fledgling. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
When I was walking Kasha one night, there was this flailing tiny little bird on the sidewalk, and it couldn't get itself going. It was on its back, and it was just like flailing around. Its wings were about like a half an inch big. Anyway, so I took it, and with one of Kash, thank God I had a doggy bag right with me. I took it home. We put it in a box. We put it with some greenery to have a little protective nest. We covered it up. So we left it outside. We covered it up though so that nobody else could get it. And the next day, the bird looked like it was feeling much better. And meanwhile, I did a little Googling, and they said that if it's a fledgling, not a nursling, if it has a little bit of feathers and so on, then actually you need to let it try to flail around, because this is how it gets strong and how. So we put it back, but it was webbed feet, so I knew it wasn't a sparrow or a swallow. It had a wide beak, and it had webbed feet, so it was either a duck or a goose or whatever. Who knows? Back to this.
Merrill Martin is a little bit of an expert on
Yeah,
birds.
she knows. I should have called her up, but it was very late at night.
So is David Kanagas.
Oh,
He knows all about
speak of
birds.
the devil. So there he is.
Well, what did Kasha do? Was she interested?
She sniffed, and then she just said, "Okay, I've got other things to think about."
Huh.
That's it. So anyway, back to this. So Rabbi Yochanan had said that Rakat was Tzipori. We have decided that he was wrong and that Rakat is really Tiberias. But now the question is, so what's Tzipori? What was the ancient name of Tzipori from the time of Tanakh? Tzipori is a name again, from contemporary rabbinic times. So we have Zeira, who says that the name originally was Kitron, and it was named Tzipori because it sits on the top of the mountain, just like a bird is perched on a like a bird on a wire, right? So that's it. Okay, but now we're not happy. The Gemara.
The Gemara challenges Zera's opinion, and is Kitron Tzipori? But Kitron was in the portion of Eretz Yisrael allocated to the tribe of Zebulun.
Okay, we're on 6A2. We're moving right along here.
As it is written, Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron and the inhabitants of Nahalol, and it is known that Zebulun was dissatisfied with this lot, i.e., he complained about the portion of the land that was divinely ordained for him. As it is said, Zebulun was a people which shamed its soul to death.
Okay, so here we have a complicated statement. We have a bunch of pieces here. With the conquest of the land in the time of Joshua, all of the tribes were allocated their place, right? This is actually first mentioned in Chumash, right at the end of Bamidbar, and then in Devarim. Each there's a lottery, and each tribe gets its own place. That's when the daughters of Tzlofchad said, "Hey, what about us? Don't forget about us." So all of that was set up before they went into the land, and then when they went into the land, there was both a concerted effort to conquer the land, but also each tribe was responsible to try to conquer its own little section. So there were both of those aspects going on at the same time. What we know again and again and again is that the conquest was not total. This is one of the things that we've talked about many, many times. Many people bring it up. This verse that we have here, Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron and the inhabitants of Nahalol. This is from the book of Judges. The book of Judges needs to be read in conjunction with the book of Joshua, and the book of Joshua needs to be read in conjunction with the book of Judges. So those of you that have been part of 929, you've already read these books and gone through them, because if you read the book of Joshua, according to the book of Joshua, we pretty much, if we did everything right, every once in a while we made a mistake, but in general, we did this completely successful conquest of the whole land. We never lost anybody. We were victorious all over the place. You know, the walls of Jericho fall down like a miracle. Everything is this, amazing, miraculous gift of God to the Jewish people. The dark side of that is that we have already, starting in Chumash, that when we conquer the land, we're not supposed to let anybody survive from the local people. This is what's called today genocide and ethnic cleansing. Ugly, ugly words. So this is a problem. We're not going to deal with it right this second, except to say that the book of Judges says that's all baloney, that the book of Joshua is actually all wrong. These are both books of Tanakh. They are side by side together on the bookshelf of our scriptures. And the book of Judges says that, are you kidding? They never wiped out all the people, and they never actually, chased everybody away. And we actually lived together for better and for worse, because we ended up actually then being subjugated, especially by the Philistines. The local populations sometimes got the upper hand over us, and we never ended up actually doing anything that the book of Joshua says that we accomplished. So, which makes the whole genocidal thing perhaps more of a rhetorical trope than it was an actual agenda, hopefully. But anyway, now we have one example of that. that the tribe of Zevulun was never able to take the inhabitants of Kitron and get them out. So we see that Kitron is part of the section of Zevulun, and Zevulun is not where Tzipori is. Tzipori is more to the east, and Zevulun was on the Mediterranean coast. So they were off to the west. So it couldn't be, therefore, that Kitron was Tzipori. Now, besides that, we have another report here that, besides the fact that Zevulun did not succeed in capturing its allotted territory, we also have now a report that Zevulun was unhappy with its allotted territory. What else is new? Right? This is all, God has assigned everybody their seating. And are you kidding? No, I don't want to sit there. I have to sit 3 rows ahead. I have to sit, next to my friend. I have to, all this divinely assigned seating is now subject to grumbling and to people kvetching about it. We have as a proof of that a verse that Zvulun was a people which shamed its soul to death. What a shame! What a chutzpah that Zvulun couldn't take God's gift of land that God gave them, and said, God, you know what? That's not good enough for us. We're really not happy. We're not satisfied with this gift of yours. So what a shame, a mortal shame. So let's look now at note 19.
Judges, according to its plain meaning, the verse praises the tribe of Zevulun for joining the battle against Sisera without
Sisera. This is time. It really is an S. It really is an S this time.
For joining the battle against Sisera without concern for their lives. Zevulun was a people that jeopardized their lives to death. However,
okay, so let's stop for a second. So the verse that is being quoted here is from the Song of Deborah. And Deborah is praising those who came out to fight against Sisera. Sisera was the general. Sometimes it's spelled in English, Sisera. He was defeated by Deborah and Barak. Certain tribes came out to fight, but certain other tribes didn't come out to fight. So Deborah, in her song, she praises those that had the courage to come out and fight, and she settles scores with those people that held back and didn't give support. So the plain meaning of the terms of the words that are in this verse is that Cheref nafsho lamut means that Zvulun risked their lives to the very death. That they were courageous and they answered the call to fight and they showed up. So that sounds like it's very good. And yet here in the Talmud, we're reading this as a condemnation. How does that work out? So, however,
the conclusion of the verse, and Naphtali on the high places of the field, is difficult to explain in this vein. The Gemara therefore interprets the verse to mean that during the war, Zevulun saw Naphtali's portion, which was situated on the high places of the field, i.e., it consisted of fertile lands and vineyards. And as a result, he became dissatisfied with his own portion. According to this interpretation, the first part of the verse is translated, Zevulun was a people which shamed its soul to death.
Because they were jealous of what Naphtali had. Naphtali had all of these wonderful, the best fields of the land, and Zevulun was complaining, why do they have so good? It literally, the grass is greener on the other side of the tribal border. So this is the way that the verse is understood here. So now let's read the digression before concluding. Back to the text.
Before concluding its proof, The Gemara digresses to explain the nature of Zevulun's complaint. Why did Zevulun complain of his lot? Because, as is stated in conclusion of the verse, Naphtali was on the high places of the field. Zevulun said before the Holy One, "Blessed is he,
Before
master
the
of
Holy
the
One, blessed is He. That's all the name for God, the Kadosh Baruch Hu. They said before the Holy One, blessed is He. That's all. That's God.
Master of the universe. To my brothers you have given fields and vineyards, but to me you have given mountains and hills. To my brothers you have given lands, but to me you have given lakes and rivers." The Holy One, blessed is he, answered him, "All your brothers will need you for the
Chilazon. Chilazon.
Hilazon, which is found in your territory. As it is said in reference to Zevulun, they call peoples to the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall such of abundance.
Suck. They shall suck of the abundance.
For they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and the covered things hidden in the sand. And Rav Yosef taught the meaning of this verse. The covered things, this refers to the
Chilazon.
helazon. Hidden, this refers to terit. Terit.
Eris. It's an S.
I know, sometimes an S
You
is
can't tell, right? You can't tell.
the D. Sand, this refers to white glass. Zevulun then said before the Holy One, blessed is he, master of the universe, who will inform me if anyone tries to take these assets without payment? The Holy One, blessed is he, answered him, there they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness. This will be assigned to you, just as a sacrifice is disqualified if it is stolen. So too, if anyone finds a hilazon and takes it from you without payment, it will not benefit his business at all.
Okay. So this was a nice long piece. It's got a lot of pieces in it. By the way, I correct myself. It is terit. You're right. It wasn't, this S was not an S. You're right. But here we go. So first we have the jealousy. First we have the jealousy part. That Zevulun is saying, Naphtali has such a better deal than we have. You've given him mountains and hills and land, but me, I have lakes and rivers. I mean, they have fields and vineyards. I have mountains and hills. They have land. We have rivers. So in this kind of fanciful conversation that Zevulun is having with God, we also simply have a nod to the way that different people inhabiting different kinds of geography see things. And in general, Israel was not so much of a seafaring people, right? The Philistines controlled most of the coast in the north and in the south. Zevulun was sort of in the middle, Tyre and all those Lebanon cities. That was part of one kind of coastal power. The Philistines were down below, Ashdod, Ashkelon. Ashdod is a big port in Israel now. And Zevulun was more in the middle, a little bit more up north. And they were by the coast. Most of what we think about when we talk about land, about the life of the Jews in the land of Israel, is very agrarian. It's very much about agriculture. It's very much about settlement on the land and so on and so forth. So this is giving a little bit of an expression to the kind of outlier feeling that the coastal peoples may have felt vis-a-vis their more settled neighbors, because they weren't establishing the greatest business as a seafaring people. They were overshadowed, and they were under the thumb of, as I say, the monopolies, the big corporations that were out there, the Philistines. So that's one of the in a kind of a legendary kind of way, they're giving expression to the fact that the people of Zvulun are a little unhappy. They don't fit in. So what's the answer? The answer is, God gives them an answer. No, but there's going to be something really precious that you're going to get from the ocean that you can't get from the land. What are you going to get from the ocean? You're going to get the chilazon. The chilazon is the creature out of which the blue dye was extracted for making the blue thread of the talit. And it was also a luxury dye for the priests and in general for aristocracy and for royalty, like we say, royal purple. So you had blue that was taken from lapis lazuli, from grinding the mineral lapis lazuli. That was one kind of very precious blue coloring. And this creature is another source from the ocean. Today, we mostly agree. For a long time, we didn't know what the heck it was. But today, we mostly agree that it's a certain kind of snail from the family Murex. And again, don't ask me anything more about it. I just know that that's what it says. So, and it's a snail whose juice or blood or whatever can be extracted, and then it makes it's processed to make a blue dye. And it takes a lot of effort, and it's a very specific kind of blue dye. It's not a big snail. You need to do a lot of collecting of it. You need to do a lot of processing. So it becomes a luxury item. Now, besides it being just a plain old luxury item, it's also a required item for the talit, right? To have that blue thread. Back in ancient times, that's what the Torah says. That, kanaf patil techelet. The word techelet is used. So what God is saying is, look, you don't have the fields, and you don't have the orchards, and you don't have all of that wonderful bounty that the other parts of society have, but you have this really amazing product that only you have access to, and you're going to make a bundle on this. This is going to be really, really, a very, very successful thing for you. So that's the answer that God tries to placate the tribe of Zevulun with. Okay, so the chutzpah that they have, unfortunately, they're not satisfied with what they got. They have to be told by God, well, just pay attention. There actually is, you can make lemonade out of these lemons. You can make blue dye out of these snails. They're not just nothing. So, but the shame of them having to be so ungrateful and is recorded here. The other thing then becomes that we have at the end this questioning. Zvulun keeps on asking God, wait a second, what if people rip me off? What if people, how do I know? What is it? How do the way they put it? Oh, by the way, besides the chilazon, there's also fish, right? Fish. Thank you, David. So there's also fish, not farming fish, but farming fish was a later thing. But you go out and you take a fishing boat and you catch fish. So what fish are they catching? So it says here that they're catching terit. So terit in the notes, note 22. Beryl, what you got there?
Rashi defines this as tuna fish.
Right. But Rashi may not be the last word on this. When I looked it up, more contemporary fish authorities think it's actually sardines. So that's what's being mentioned here. So you have a little bit of a fish industry also, and literally a little one, not a big one. Okay, but now you have yes.
I would think in a desert country, having lakes and rivers would be a plus, not a minus. But I guess these guys didn't agree.
What do you mean by a desert country? Why is Israel a desert country?
Well, everything you read about Israel, they're always talking about the desert and it's dry and water is a blessing.
So in contemporary Israel, the way the map is drawn now, contemporary Israel, over half of the landmass is the Negev, the south,
Yeah.
which is dry. The word Negev means dry land. So, and that's the desert part, right? And that's where we have the beautiful idea of making the desert bloom. But Jewish communities in ancient times didn't live down there much. They did some mining down there for copper and things like that, but it was inhospitable living area. The tribes that are if you go back to your Eitz Chaim Chumash, where they give you some maps, you'll see that it's really from Beersheba north that the biblical land exists, and that the tribes are given their divided allotments. Now, some of that is kind of like the hills of Judea are not exactly flourishing greenery, but there's plenty of greenery. All of the valleys, the Jezreel Valley, and the valleys as it goes down from the hills of Judea down into the Mediterranean. Those are all farming lands, and the whole Galilee is farming lands. So there's plenty of farming, and then in terms of lakes and rivers, the thing is that the rivers. The rivers of Israel are an embarrassment compared to some of the rivers that are out there in the world. You take the Jordan River and compare it to the Mississippi. It's like 1/zillionth of a. The Jordan River is a joke, and the other rivers, the Yarkon, or these other little rivers that are tributaries.
The Nile.
Well, the Nile is the Egypt, but I'm saying in the land of Israel, the rivers are minuscule.
Well, that's my lack of knowledge of geography. I'm sorry I brought
That's why we're studying this Talmud. This was all bait and switch. Is all I thought I was going to tell you about Talmud. But really, it's all about Israeli geography. So, back to the Zebulunites. So Zebulun then complains to God, and says, "Who will inform me if anyone tries to take these assets without payment?" Okay, so what kind of question is that? What kind of question is that? What's going on here? And in Naphtali, where they have the farmland, who's going to protect them if somebody takes their land without payment? So it's not simply a question of that. Part of the problem with the Chilazon was that there was a kind of a black market in Chilazon. You know that there was, because it was a luxury item, because it wasn't just a bushel of wheat or something like that. It was a super special commodity. There were people that were selling chilazon on the side. However, this is like Rolex watches. How many Rolex watches can you buy on Broadway that are real Rolex watches? The idea is that you make it look like a Rolex watch, but it's not a Rolex watch. The black market is not so much about, I stole a truckload of real chilazon, it's like a real tchelet. No, I'm making things that look like tchelet. A knockoff product. So we know that the tchelet, the blue for the talit, eventually disappeared because it was overtaken by phony tchelet. And nobody was able to control that market. And that's why most of us do not have the blue thread in our talit. I don't have it in my talit. Some people in the shul still, actually have a blue thread. And whether they have the right one is actually a good question. Because, one second, Jen. Because for a good 1,000 years or more, Nobody had the blue thread. And it's only in modern times that there was a push, starting in the 19th century, to rediscover the blue dye of the tchelet. And there were all kinds of attempts to do this. And there is a Hasidic group, the Radziner, who have their talitot with a blue thread because their Rebbe claimed that he figured out how to make tchelet. The rest of the world does not accept their tchelet, and they say that their tchelet is actually wrong tchelet. It's not. So it could have been the kind of tchelet actually that the phony tchelet, the counterfeit tchelet that was flooding the market back in rabbinic times. So, but anyway, they're convinced their Rebbe can do no wrong. So if they have that blue, that's what they use. So it looks like they have the blue thread. Now there's been another discovery of tchelet. It started back with Rabbi Herzog, who eventually he was in England. He was the chief rabbi, I think, of Ireland for a while, and then he became the chief rabbi of Israel, and he wrote his PhD on tchelet, and he ended up doing the scientific research. Sorry, that debunked the tchelet that I was mentioning, and that accepted the murex snail as the tchelet. So now there's a company in Israel that's called Ptil Tchelet, which means the string of tchelet, the string of this deep blue color, and they market talitot. They market the dye. They market the dyed strings for tzitzit, and they encourage people to do that. So some people have those have that talit, but for 1,000 years in between, nobody had any blue, and the Mishnah already says, what can we do? We don't have the blue anymore. Should we give up on the mitzvah of talit altogether because we don't have the blue thread? And they said, no, let's keep it with just the white because that's better than nothing. Yeah, Jen.
So the original mitzvah stipulates that it has to be from this, whatever this we interpret this snail to be now.
No, it tells us that it has to be a certain material. A certain tchelet is understood by the tradition to be a certain blue dye, and then the question is, where do you get it from?
So
it doesn't tell you the snail. It doesn't tell you what, it doesn't give you anything except the name of the color.
So there's nobody interprets it as well as long as we can get this color. It doesn't have to be a...
No, on the contrary. That was the problem. The problem was that everybody else was able to abuse that and saying, well, you know what, we'll fool people. As long as it looks like it, it'll be fine. And the rabbi said, no, if it's not tchelet, it's not right.
So there's no way to get a vegetarian blue then in your talit.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, you can do it. It's just not going to be tchelet.
Right. Okay. So that's my question. Thank you.
All right. We're going to stop for today, and we look forward to continuing next time. Yasher koach, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.